Oh, dear Lord. All right, so Brooks was 83. I turned that off for there. All right, so Brooks should be on, and he should be reasonably loud.
We'll test that.
And Maute is on. You're both on.
Check 1. Check
Oof.
2.
Maybe half the volume of you.
No, your volume's going to adjust.
And check 1, 2.
All right.
That sounds solid. All right, that sounds okay.
Oh, we got it.
Yeah.
Ladies,
all right,
gentlemen.
So first
Children
things
of all
first,
ages.
sincerest apologies to everybody, especially both
my
of you
fault.
for that.
Don't touch anything, Nick.
I know. I'd love to blame
Don't even
Brooks.
look
Like I said, we have multiple points. We have as many points of failure as possible on the show. We don't like to fail in just one way. Presumably, if we can get this off the ground, we also have a show tonight at 9:30. We got Commander Lance McMillan is going to be on. We got a lot to talk about with Ukraine, so that's going to be good. I hope you guys will join us.
I'm actually busy. Can we do this another time?
And then we've got
How do I not make that joke at this point? Christ.
Operator Starsky, we're going to have on tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern to talk about Ukraine. He's a Ukrainian National Guardsman. He is literally right there. We're going to talk about what's going on. The largest set of missile strikes since the war started happened yesterday, along with the Poland thing, which we're going to be talking about tonight. So that's the schedule. And until then, Brooks, Maute, finally, welcome.
Thank you, Nick. I just want to let you know that you rock my fat ass. It's very fun to listen to you while you're problem solving. It's unlike anything else. Like, I think that should be its own niche channel of like Nick, just a stream of supercuts of Nick.
Did we just disconnect?
Oh, did the shields go down? Oh, shoot, the shields went down. We can't hear Maute anymore. I don't know what happened. It's just all these technical issues. I just don't know. I don't know.
Is Kanye West level conspiracy. Are you going to pull my Adidas deal now? What is happening?
Okay, well, listen.
Okay,
so the two of you had a really good conversation last time. I know nobody is here to see me. Absolutely nobody's here to see me. And apparently they're not here to hear you. But at any rate, or if they are, it's going to be a long night. So what was it? Were you guys first like hung out here? Oh, and we already had a super chat from Sinister, but I'll get to that in a little bit. I want to get started with stuff. So
listen. Here's what happened. You did a stream on the midterm elections. We decided to grace you with our presence. We had some things to say. I heard Brooks talk, and I was like, listen, this motherfucker is speaking some weird shibboleth language that I totally am made out of questions about, because he just used all the right words. The way that he was talking about just libertarianism, and then the way he kind of went off on his tangents. You went off on you didn't quite go off on tangents, but you peppered your language with, like it said, somewhat like shibboleth, like, ooh, like there's more there. Like you're speaking a secret language that I think if I ask the right questions, I can decode.
Excellent.
And it's not going to happen all tonight. No. So I'm imagining this is going to happen a few times. But for today, here's what I would like to start with, if you don't mind. I don't think we're going to get real far until we have a meeting of the minds about what variables go into what variables go into a functioning society from your perspective. From there, we can start talking strategies and functions of institutions.
Well, that's going to be, I think, a hell of a place to start.
I spent a little time thinking about where we should start, and I'm thinking this is going to be fun. This is going to be fun.
Talk about, are we having a question in terms of like a society that's idealized out in the future, what a society might look like that would actually be fully workable, where people would truly be free? Or are we talking more the imminent actual lived experience we have now and where we should be guiding towards? Because they're very different discussions.
See, I don't know if I would choose any of those three buckets, because what I'm thinking, my fantasy is, what would be the sufficient variables for an society? I'm purposely like misusing that, but just like a society that functions is going to have at least these things. From there, I think we can apply that to how does it work in real life? How does that look through the lens of a more conservative, a less conservative, a blah, blah, blah lens? That's what I'm thinking. But I'm happy to take it wherever your head's taking it.
Let's just start with the question itself. I think my criticism would be where I would end up carrying it, which is the idea of having a goal society at all naturally conditions its own answer. So to say, what would you say is the best conditions for a society to function presupposes a goal-oriented stance of a place or an aim we should be heading for. Secondly, it says that we have a society that we're able to measure or set against itself in any meaningful way, which I think is its own debatable question. And then
I'm happy to go with it observational if you wanted to go with that approach, which is the more realistic thing. Where we can point to things and say this, or we can even speak historically, right? Because speaking of, we kind of, from my perspective at least, we need to at least encompass a little bit of history and the fact that where we are now is because of things that have happened in the past. And, arbitrary decisions, arbitrary events that happened in the past that could perpetually have changed our trajectory to put us where we are. But if we were to start with okay, humans are social creatures. We used to be more hunter-gatherer, right? Societies, and then agriculture changed that.
I'm not sure I necessarily agree with that.
Okay. Well, let's start there then, because I mean that's me painting in super broad strokes. But, I'm happy to take on board some correction or nuance.
It's one of the David Graeber's new book. I think, despite having a significant number of flaws in how it cites, I think does a decent job of sort of debunking the sort of traditionalist myth of the Western Caucasian story of, society found hunter-gatherers and we then moved into agriculture. Instead, that there's actually a huge number of societies that sort of existed in a significantly more egalitarian sense in different ways, that hunter-gatherer societies survived and ended up having large-scale empires of a different sort. And so having that sort of traditionalist view of, we went for this, puts a very steady view on specifically maybe Germanic, Roman, and other tribes versus the rest of the world, which had a very different...
Let me interrupt you just for a second. I love what you're saying. Please, for me in the audience, what is the name of the book by David Graeber?
One sec.
Wow, that's a great title.
No, it's A Brief History of Humanity. Dawn of Everything. The New History of Humanity.
Excellent. Thank you.
There are issues with it. He did die making it, so it is slightly unfinished, and there's a few studies I think that are miscited. I did find the book to be very captivating, and a lot said in it is generally spot on.
Excellent. So real quick, another thing, I have always, again, painting in broad strokes, considered the hunter-gatherer societies more egalitarian. And it seems like you were making a distinction between egalitarian societies versus hunter-gatherer societies. So I wanted to unpack that.
I don't think necessarily it's more egalitarian. I try my best not to sort of set out and have an idea of any sort of, the hunter-gatherers were more egalitarian without understanding sort of how their social roles came to be, how they created them. Hunter-gatherer societies, again, if you go back to, whether it's Levi Strauss or Reich or a lot of different people, they were brutal, hyper-oppressive, hierarchized groups in and of their own right. They may have been better than some other societies, but there are entire agrarian societies in Africa, South America, Southeast Asia that were able to be and were themselves sort of more egalitarian or treated property differently than us. There's a totalization when we talk about hunter-gatherer. We tend to do sort of the noble savage thing and talk about a couple versions of the American Indian, for example, the Native Americans.
Unpack that. See, these are the things that you need. You say them casually, and I smell what you're selling, but we have an audience listening.
Yeah. So the way we look back at history, we do so from a specific position. And I'm with you when you say history matters. I would say history matters more than we understand. There's a line in The Black Swan that I loved that got famous during the second Gulf War, the invasion of Iraq.
Talib, Black Swan?
Yes, Talib, yeah, fantastic book. And he goes, there are things we know, things we don't know, and things we don't know that we don't know.
That's the Rumsfeld line, right?
The Rumsfeld thing. But they always fuck up because there's a fourth quadrant. And there are things that we don't know that we know. And that, to me, is the most important quadrant of all, because it's the stuff that is making up your decisions that you are not aware of. Like, you don't know that you know these things. And an example of that would be when people say hunter-gatherer societies versus agrarian, we naturally think of, on the one side, sort of a Eurocentric or Greek culture of farming and buildings and having a village. And on the other side, we think of a noble savage, maybe at best, or even straight up savages, of these like primitive people who go out, they hunt, they kill, they move, they continue to travel. And the reality is those two distinctions, well, being useful in ethnological and archaeological and anthropological circles, the reality is they're totalizing, because there's no such thing as a single type of society. When I say totalizing, I mean we're saying, oh, this is this shape. Instead, it's kind of a mishmash of a whole fuckload of different things that we've kind of designated in a category. And as we do that and we look back, and this is, Graeber makes this point, I think, better than I am, that how we understand what it means to be a hunter-gatherer or to be an agrarian society is shaped by the space we live in. So when we look back through the Eurocentric sort of history of all of it, and we say, oh, like Kropotkin's book, Conquest of Bread, we talk very specifically about a handful of property matters and other things, when the reality is, in tons of societies, Pierre Clastra's Society Against the State, I think, is a phenomenal book on a society that very much has a hyper-egalitarian, even though we don't fully grasp it, but non-society, an almost anarchist non-society, but is able to completely function because they hate any semblance of centralized power. That's the thing they fight against. Wonderful book, highly recommend it. There's a lot of different waves of it. So when we have these conversations, we talk about, oh, we came from this, those things are conditioned by where we ended up, because that's the lens we're looking back at history through. That's the sort of nature of that.
I think a danger in one of the points that you were making with the, I think, Kropotkin, where it seems ripe for cherry picking, right? So, for instance, in general, the idea that a society, even if it hated centralized power, was able to sustain itself without centralized power would be an anomaly. Right. And we could find organisms that seem social or have a hive mentality that behave in ways that could support an idea that it is natural for humans to behave that way as well. And to my mind, that would be category. This is not something I'm accusing you of doing. What I'm saying is some of that line of thinking seems to, like, I've talked to people who, like, in talking about Kropotkin, like, of course humans can live in those kinds of societies, and then they give me an example of, like, some organism that is not a human doing something that they think is evidence for that claim, and then it always strikes me as sideways. Now, that's not necessarily that's neither here nor there, but in talking about, you're kind of touching on one of the more important things. If you're going to talk about how we view history, right? And again, we both agree that history is important, but we don't necessarily, this isn't the platform to go over all of the history. But the point that you're making about, in general, the way that history has been addressed, even broad histories, like the Jared Diamonds or the, what's his name? The weird author guy. Enrique. I can't remember his name right now.
No clue.
They can be totalizing. And you were talking about the noble savage, and that being a particular lens through which hunter-gatherer societies could be viewed using incorrect totalizing lenses. But I do want you to go over, remind people what the noble savage lens is in looking at things through that.
You see it a lot in I mean, America, where I think there's a significant amount of it in cartoons, movies, and things like that, where it's because they're primitive, therefore they were more noble. That's the idea. Dances with Wolves and things like that. Instead, there's a reality to a sheer brutality that a lot of sort of indigenous tribes take upon each other. Again, it's not a judgment case. It's just sort of the nature of how they behaved and treated. We do horrifying shit to each other also. Like, so it's just, it's
an extension of the naturalistic fallacy. If it's natural, it's good, right?
Well,
but so
and again,
venom,
I think
so are earthquakes. They're all natural as well.
To point of one of the things you said, it's this idea that man has a nature, or that the nature of man is X. And when we get to the point of being with nature, naturally we should be in a better place. But the reality is there is no like nature. The dichotomy of man and nature itself is something that doesn't even exist until we categorize. And so there's this looking back and going, oh, how amazing it would be for us to be able to live in nature, and that silliness that goes with that sort of the noble savage trope, putting us in that place of saying like, oh, they're better than us because of that. It's a silly way to look at things.
I agree. Now, in talking about what makes up a functioning society, I think that you brought up a good point in. So this is where so research in the social sciences and research in history and stuff like that is evolving towards, like things evolve, diversification more than towards a specific goal. And what I'm seeing is, so let me break that down a little bit. Let's see. In looking at histories and the history of histories, it's becoming clear that attempting to find a human universal, is becoming a smaller and smaller island to stand on, right? Even with the basic idea of a weird society, a Western educated, industrialized, rich, democratic society, right? Looking for basic, I'm going to take a step back and use basic psychology, right? Trying to find psychological universals in college students from weird societies is now being kind of shown to be a farce, right? Trying to look for universals in and of itself is shown to be a farce in the emotions research that's going on right now, in the memory research, in the perception research, right? There is no, to your point, a universal nature of humans other than we have a brain that is in control of body budgeting. And because it wants to predict things, we live in a simulation that affects our consciousness and perception and allows us to adapt to the environment that we simulate through those predictions, right? With that in mind, it's difficult to say all humans do this, all humans do that. You can't really point towards anything other than the processes that are currently discovered as all humans doing. But those processes in discovering them makes us way more messy and adaptable than, I think your point is, than trying to totalize our behavior in the past as history has done. Is that a fair assessment?
Anyone who's been a parent, I think, can see what I consider to be the only universal I've ever experienced amongst humanity, which is kind of the way that we grow and how we learn from that very early age. I think the first year of a life, there's almost a weird, everyone who's ever lived has gone through this reality to how they've learned to eat or not, or, just react to the world. There's an oddness to that process that is kind of incredible, to be honest. But aside from that, no, there's no underlying man has a certain kind of soul, burn a certain way, needs to be this way, set up this way. Instead, we are necessarily a series of processes that ultimately push towards something that is much larger and that continually sort of build us up. We are the result of those processes, tends to be how I believe, rather than necessarily that we create them or that we push processes outwards.
Say that last part again.
The processes that make us up. You talked them, stimulation, the way that we respond to stimulus from the external world. There's a lot of different ways of thought on this. Sort of traditionalist sort of viewpoint on one side is we are X, humans are born, and they respond to a lot of stimulus that comes out and sort of grow into being a person. I tend to believe that even the human subjectivity itself is actually the process of a series of stimulus result satisfaction bits that sort of make up the person, and over time, emergently, we come out of that rather than having a singular essence ever.
Oh, and it even goes deeper than that, because that kind of learning that you're talking about, if you're going to say that it is environment bound, that we're learning learning about the environment, the womb is an environment.
Yeah.
Right. And so, I mean, but that takes it to a completely different level to me, because now when we're talking about like, okay, so we're dancing around nature nurture. Let's just call it out for what it is. We're kind of talking about the human nature, what we're born with, what most people in broad terms call biology, versus what people in broad terms. And your point is these distinctions wouldn't exist unless we superimpose them on society.
Correct.
And that, again, is being shown to be a false dichotomy. In teaching in all of the new books that the authors of all the newest movements, right? So Lisa Feldman Barrett writing about emotion and perception, Anil Seth talking about consciousness and perception, Robert Plomin talking about behavioral genetics. They all have different ways of breaking down that dichotomy that we falsely have placed on biology and environment, and they're talking about the nature of nurture. Right, nature and nurture. It's not this verse thing, and the two of them are so interfacing. The boundary is so fluid. It's almost, unless you're talking about super specific things, it's very difficult to tease out one variable from another. And those super specific things, that's a controversial topic, but I think behavioral genetics has a very interesting set of data to show how much genetics, unfettered, can determine certain things, not in a strictly deterministic way, but the correlations are very robust, and I happen to find them compelling. That's a different topic.
But at that point, you're ultimately talking also about epigenetics, where the world and our environment ends up changing our genes as well. And again,
well, to be clear, not changing our genes, changing the way that our genes that we have express. Fair enough.
The way that our genes operate.
Yes.
The nature of all this, though, again, to get back at it, you put it very nicely with, I can't tell where I begin and nature ends.
There you go.
That conversation is ultimately sort of getting back to where I tend to land, which is that there is no such thing as Brooks as a thing. Brooks is a vector, a series of vectors, that you might say. We are all eternally a process. All of us are. And at best, we're able to guess kind of some level of that. But the way that we interface, the way that we bounce into people, the way that our desire ultimately makes us make choices, and then we create words for that excuse, as I've said before, and we'll get into all these things at some point. But the general idea is that
so hold on a second. I want to pat you on the back for the whole vector thing, because that opens. I like that analogy so much, because one vector could just be yourself and identity, right? Even though it has changed over time, it is a vector. It is an I. I'm still I that I was 20 years ago.
It's never even stable within the vector. By nature of sort of how that works. It's never a stable.
I'm having fun with this, brother. I love that. Vectors. All right. So I interrupted you just to brag about how good that was.
No, it's fine. It basically was making my point. We are constantly in a state of change. The one thing underneath all of it that we experience is change. It's the only thing we actually experience. There's no such thing as like a moment of time. There's like that joke of, hey, have you ever experienced a moment? Yeah, there it went. There. We only know it after the fact. We only know a thing has happened afterwards. The only thing we actually experience is change. We don't get to experience the snapshot.
Oh, it's even deeper than that. From my perspective, it's even deeper than that. As I understand things, we're not even, the only change that we're experiencing are the ones that deviate from our expectations, which is part of our prediction error correcting methods, right? Based on a model of statistical learning. Right. Our brain is perpetually setting out predictions, and just like YouTube videos, where like if most of the screen is black, like for instance, if it's a video of a person talking against a black background, YouTube isn't sending a brand new picture every frame. It's just sending the bits that are different from the last one. That's how perception works. You only interact with reality when your predictions are incorrect and reality deviates from it. If reality doesn't deviate from your predictions, you don't interact with reality.
No, it's the old joke. You are now aware that you are breathing.
There we
go.
A
moment ago, but you were doing it. It's not like you weren't experiencing breathing, but now you're aware of it. So enjoy.
Exactly. I do it very quickly. I do a mindfulness exercise with my students when we talk about consciousness in class. I teach Intro to Psych. And when we cover consciousness, I talk about altered states of consciousness, and so I'm able to talk about meditation. And so I do a mindfulness meditation with them, and I just give them an example. I'm like, pay attention to this, blah, blah. I was like, you probably didn't even realize that you can feel what the top of your left hand feels like until I just said that. right? And then you can see the smiles on some of the students' faces where it's just like, yes, where you direct your attention to things that are already happening is almost remarkable. You're wearing socks. What do your socks feel like?
I did extensive work in virtual reality, where I spend a lot of time fucking with perception and really playing heavily with it. One of the more extraordinary bits I ever got a chance to do was is two people, VR headsets with shitty webcams, like 360 webcams, and man and woman, and you just swap the camera into the other headset. So you see their body and they see yours. Very strange experience, by the way. But all the way through to a piece I did that I did very well. I won Tribeca and Sundance. We had people screaming and crying because they experienced a little girl being crushed by rocks and not being able to pull her out of it. We did some there's actually papers written on how what I did was maybe unethical, which is fine.
It sounds very
but it's
a Stanford prison experiment.
Well, I wanted to, my thing at the base level was to really see, because carnival emotions were the base of virtual reality. Mm-hmm. What's up, buddy? 1 second. We got a new guest. I have not seen Mom. Do you want to come say hi to someone? No. No. Okay.
I appreciate candor.
Yeah. So I wanted carnival emotions, I find to be the most easy to replicate in people. Like in carnival emotions being shock or guffaws or laughter, like garbage. Mm-hmm. I wanted to ruin someone's day. I wanted to see how far we could push someone's perception to really make them feel like they had a trauma. Because I wanted to, for a lot of reasons, I kind of have experienced a trauma or two, and it's kind of a big deal to me. So that setup.
Hold on a second, for the listening audience. If you're having the wrong ideas about what was just said, I do want to stand up for you just for a second right now. And the idea, think about this. The disinfectant that you use in your bathroom had to be tested against a standardized U.S. government malodor. Treatments can't be tested unless you're able to evoke a response and then give a treatment to them to determine what happens after you've evoked that response. While there are ethical questions, it
was. But what we did was, to me, the simple version is I wanted to create a way for people to experience safe trauma. Because one of the most important things about people who've had PTSD is they try to do exposure therapy. It did not work for me. The reason it doesn't work is because you're not actually exposing someone to trauma. You're exposing them to images of it that they are absolutely disconnected from. And as someone who's experienced trauma, that is 100% of the time people have that conversation like, yeah, I know, I saw it's something. And so it's better than nothing. But the ability to actually re-experience, but do so safely, helps with processing. And I can tell you, personally, it does. So the ability for us to play with perception and what a person feels as they do things, or how we can fuck with stimulation overall in order to make a person do X or be Y. Mm-hmm. It's, for me, the reason I've always enjoyed being in video games, and the reason I've been in the industry for as long as I have, is because it's an industry that literally is about manipulating you, telling you, getting you to do the next thing that we want you to do. And it is that, whether it's intentional, whether it's unintentional, whether it's positive or not, Candy Crush and Uncharted have the same technique in order to get you to do the thing they want you to do next.
Well, having you do what people want you to do, whether you realize it or not, has landed us perfectly in this topic of psychology of politics. Yes. Because you and I aren't the only people that know these things.
Oh, yeah.
And current political strategies are based on other people's understanding of how malleable perception is.
Well, and if you go back, the first PR agency, and really a lot of this garbage, was created by Freud's nephew. So,
oh, really? Oh, I would have given it to John B. Watson, the behaviorist, because after he was shamefully removed from his university, he went into marketing. And as I understand it, the very psychological bend of American marketing is a direct consequence of John B. Watson going into advertising.
Bernays is the guy who made him who he is. Okay. Bernays is the dude. So he went in, and his thing was he realized through what his uncle taught. Is it uncle? Pretty sure uncle. What his uncle taught, that you can manipulate desire and play with desire by changing the images people see. He put it up against the war. It was the first thing he did is he went into war propaganda. He's fucking super good at it. And then he went into American capitalism, super good ad agency. And then also into the American government and did a lot of shit there. Super
Let's talk more about that. Let's talk more about what he did in the American government. Because we're talking about people who are masters at changing perception, knowing what levers to pull for the manipulation of that perception. And what were they doing with the government? I mean, aside from the propaganda of it.
Well, I mean, like literally the propaganda of how they talked about get out, do this, how to get people domestically to support World War I. Because like we're talking about way long ago. We are not talking about World War II.
It was so long ago, it is baked into like sound bites of politicians so naturally talk in that vernacular. It's almost like it's baked into it. Like you can't not be a politician without speaking with that accent almost.
No, it's exactly that. And his entire push was about how corporate advertising ultimately can start pushing people towards what the purchase needs to be. One of the things, and it's most recently, I want to say, Adam Curtis did the documentary that mentioned it and really went deep into it. The Century of Self documentary, really good.
Froze?
That was absolutely not me. I didn't touch a thing. I had nothing to do with that. I'm just saying.
He looks handsome as fuck in that frozen picture. That's a great picture of him.
That's a good. We need a card for him anyway at this point, so maybe we'll just make a card based off of that. Now, yeah, we lost his, but it'll be back. There he is.
Well, hello.
Yeah, Maute said it was my fault. Maute was blaming me.
This is the real Brooks.
I'm going to blame
person was a fraud.
I'll blame you. That's an.
Yeah. Oh, hashtag all Nick's fault. Oh, great.
Oh no.
Oh, there we go. There we go.
Oh no.
Okay, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take this moment. We have 2 super chats from Sinister Porpoise. They were a while back, but I want to let you guys chat. So first, we have a $2 super chat, Sinister Porpoise, half for Linux PC. She said she can solve all my Windows problems by getting me a Linux. And then half for
overrated.
Half for 𝐒𝐤𝐬𝐿𝐼ng's college fund. We're trying to turn 𝐒𝐤𝐬𝐿𝐼ng liberal by getting him into a liberal arts college and having him get brainwashed.
Sorry about that.
No worries. I'm just doing a quick super chat. And another $2 from Sinister Porpoise. I would pay more money to watch Nick do tech support. Thank you. Somebody who appreciates my live tech support skills.
Sinister must like you a lot.
yes. I lucked out on that one. All right, Sinister, thank you so much as always for your support. We really appreciate it. And with that, now that Brooks is back, gentlemen, please, you were saying.
Yeah, we were talking about how baked in propaganda language is to just everyday language. Except, especially Mike Pence. Hold on a second. We need to bring up that Mike Pence is a fucking robot that was programmed with this propaganda speech. Did you see this goddamn town hall on CNN?
It's a lot. He's very good
at it.
Well, he's good at it because he's specifically trying to lay the road for what the Republicans want, which is Trump out, and they want their new fascist sort of.
But he didn't look strong. He looked idiotic.
None of them look strong.
But that can you? This is me projecting a little bit, but speculating, I should say. It seemed like he badly was training to act like he had strength in an attempt to project.
He's always talked like that. He's always talked like the dad of the girlfriend. He was
talking about his life being threatened. Well, I forgave him. I'm a Christian, and as Christians, go fuck yourself.
Well,
with that condescending. Well, as Christians, we can forgive. Go fuck yourself.
Well, that's just how I'm going to feel about it. Like he's the dad of the girlfriend who's too religious, who doesn't have his own personality, because he doesn't, and he's always existed in that space because he has been basically put there. And
he used to do a radio show. How boring could that have been?
Well, significant, but to go back, the challenge with Bernays and what he brought is a unique type of political and advertising play that specifically wore on the image of desire underneath all of it. That was the thing. He kind of, again, he wrote books in like the 1920s about this, where way ahead of the curve when it comes to like Mad Men advertising. This is the
Right.
early shit. And he did a thing with a cigarette company where some cigarette company was saying that, we have singers who use our cigarettes and it's gentle on their throats. And he basically came out and called them pussies. And like only men want real cigarettes. Now that is not a thing that, like, that's hardcore. Now we see that a lot, by the way. Be a real man. Like, that's a thing in the last 50 years that has absolutely been intertwined. But this was new. It was like, holy shit. What do you do? Are you attacking that mentality of, hey, are you a wuss? You going to be a man? You're going to be you're going to do that thing? That was not a thing that existed in advertising prior to that. Advertising was seen almost as your job is to show people how good your stuff is and may the best man win. He changed that to, well, you can actually manipulate people to buying your stuff even if it doesn't matter.
Well, I can imagine it was seen as gauche. You know what I mean? Like, even today, certain kinds of advertising seem cheap and gauche. I don't know how else to put it. Like, just so over the top and corny and brazen and brassy. You know what I mean? Like Trump, like everything about Trump, the color of his skin, his hair, the contrast of the red, white, and blue tie shirt, and like everything is Technicolor exaggerated.
But it works.
It does, but he's not a cartoon character. He's a human.
No. I mean, he is personally, sure, but that's not what he exists as to
no,
the people
he has a
follow him.
brand that he's selling. He branded himself as something, and he's selling that brand. He's not being a human.
Yeah.
In a different way than
that.
Mike Pence, who's doing the same thing, but looks like a goddamn robot. You want up?
Yeah, no, I'll give you that. I think it's when we start talking about the shift over time, also start going back to where I think we saw it the worst with things like Willie Horton, which I think was flat hardcore propaganda in that vein. And it had been done before, but never so blatantly, but we saw it since then. My favorite would be George Bush against John McCain during the primaries, having pollsters call South Carolina, having pollsters call probable South Carolina voters, asking that if it turned out John McCain had an illegitimate black child, would that affect their vote? That's hardcore. And by the way, he does have one. It's not illegitimate. He adopted. He's a that was like the one decent thing that piece of shit did. And it ended up becoming, it's from an affair, is what they implied. Now, it's this really fascinating play where you start changing how people regard facts. And that's really when you start going back to the laying out of things. And again, if we talk about people being a vector, so are stories. So are the way we see ourselves in the world. Everything is about this consistent becoming and the order of things that are placed in front of us. And when we have someone placing things in front of us, but telling us the story and telling us the end of the story, that automatically everything falls back in line behind that. There's like a nature to how we tell stories that defines itself.
But to get back to the unknown concept, what we don't know what we don't know, right?
We don't know what we do know.
Well, but yes, that was the quadrant that you had focused on. But one of them was we don't know what we don't know. And what I think is when you place a frame on reality, right, in an attempt to start a vector, start a node for a vector, if you will, or tap a pre-existing vector, there are unforeseen consequences. And like I think. So, for instance, I'm gonna try to pull together some things that might seem super random. Are you ready? Do you remember the bell curve, the book?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, I'm gonna pull together.
Not a great read.
It's boring. It's a tome, right? Thank God they had the summaries at the beginning of the chapters. But the bell curve. And Charles Murray idea of elitism, which that was part of his vector, right? That's his whole thing. Is the white underserved, and the current disdain for elites that Trumpism is pretty much fomenting, and the audacity of a Charles Murray to talk bad about Trump. I can't believe this, but and not own the fact that present talk about anti-elitist, the elites, just that language that Trump uses and weaponizes so well was started, like, that's his jam. The bell curve was about, under Charles Murray's whole thing is a very conservative. He's at the American Enterprise Institute. Yeah, he's got a conservative agenda, and he placed a note about anti-elites, where now it's being weaponized against people who work in think tanks like him, and he's crying as if Trump is a horrible thing, doing horrible things with horrible ideas. And he's not owning the fact that he's the goddamn asshole who put out the controversial book that brought the eyes to his agenda, which is, oh, look at how poorly the white underclass are being served. All these elites are taking all the glory and all the power and blah, blah, and leaving them in the dust, and the elites and the elites. And then Trump goes, yeah, you know what? The fucking elites. And Charles Murray started a vector that he didn't know what the consequences would be. He created a monster. If you're going to be if you're not going to buy into division of labor such that there are going to be people who know things better than you with expertise that you can't have, because we've agreed that society functions better when we divide labor, and there are people who know things, and that is their job to know that, so that we don't have to be plumbers and mechanics and logistician. What's the word I want to use? When somebody who does logistics. Logistician? Is that such a thing? Regardless.
Logician.
Logician. Okay, that sounds too much like magician, so I didn't want to go for it.
It's a logician. It's identical. Raymond Smullyan, who was a professor of logic at I want to say Indiana State University, used to joke about it because he was also a magician.
Good. Well, that makes it easy, actually. That's a good little mnemonic device. Logician, magician. Anyway, I've talked long enough, but I wanted the overall point I wanted to bring up was starting vectors that you can't, the unknown, right? If you can start a vector and not be able to control it. And we're talking about controlling people's perceptions. And we're talking about how politicians use that. And politicians push policy. But politicians aren't the only people who come up with policy to be pushed. People like Charles Murray, working in think tanks, come up with these ideas and publish them. And these are, and what's the name of that one institute that is mostly responsible for getting as many of the Supreme Court judges
Heritage
voted?
Foundation.
Thank you. I thought it was the Federalist.
Federalist Society also. They both are. Federalist Society, I think, is their whatever. Fuck all of them.
Anyway, I've blabbed, but I think I hope you're picking up a little bit about what I'm throwing down.
Well, I think Charles Murray is an interesting one, and I think actually does get at what we're talking about, because I have a handful of points I disagree with you on. Not overall. I do think he's a gigantic human pile of feces in a human sack. So, sure.
I could listen to him read the dictionary. His voice is amazing.
He does have a decent voice.
Ain't gonna lie.
But what he does read tends to be pretty terrible. His play has not been against elites.
Oh, come on.
No. His play has been against poor and black people. So his first book...
What do you mean against poor?
His first book was A History of the Welfare Society and Its Failures. That was his first major study that he came out with prior to the bell curve. That's not anti-elite. That's pro-elite.
But in general, he's known as having the angle of the white underclass being underserved by the social programs that are being overutilized by the people of color. That's his angle.
But again, that's not an elite. That's not a reinforcement necessarily of the elitism as he sees it. Now, from our position, yes, it's a reinforcement.
But he's coming from the white underclass's perspective. He's the hero of the white underclass.
So the important thing for me when it comes to Charles Murray is not to say where they're coming from based on our perspective or based on a lot of things like that. Instead, it's to figure out where he sits. Two ways. First,
he's a liar, though.
Oh no, I'm not. Again, I'm not listening to him. This is not about listening to him. Like listening to his words as directed.
This is awesome.
If a piano is poorly tuned, you can pick out the notes by listening to it. It doesn't mean the song's good. So it's just about listening and going, okay, where are the notes off? What is he saying? What is he actually interested in? And if you go through and you read his books, if you read listen to a lot of his talks, there's kind of two places, and it's the two things that I will, and anyone in your audience who knows me, I come from this sort of Deleuze school of thought, and so anti-Oedipus, I'm going to start stealing stuff from there right away. and blah, blah, blah. We'll get into that at some point. There's two sides of sort of what makes us do what we do politically. One is, let's say, it's our unconscious desires and what they're really attached to. This is the stuff that over our lives has resulted in positive stimulus, or that due to repression we've put in different places. And this is like the pure force of our investment.
This is very psychodynamic.
Yes. The second level would be where we see ourselves class-wise. And this is not a real conscious, like, oh, I am this member of this class, but instead where we pre-consciously see ourselves as a class member. What is our pre-conscious place within this? That comes after unconscious, but it is not a, oh yes, I am a member of the working class or the upper class. It's where you see yourself. This is how you get people, for example, the reason I say pre-conscious, it's how you get people who are like Trump supporters who call themselves the middle class despite being worth, tens of millions of dollars. It doesn't matter where they are. That's like an objective measurement from a quantification. What we care about is, where do they see themselves? And when you talk about Charles Murray, he flat sees himself as an avenger of those who have been done wrong.
Yes.
And he sees that overall, black people, Mexicans, not Asians, he likes them. They're great. They
score higher on IQ than whites.
They've been underserved, but he doesn't see that as him being necessarily a member of that class. Now, he is aware that he is a member of that class, and he is absolutely one of the smarter people he knows. And you have to be aware, he got there because of his own hard work, not because of all of the things that sort of put him in his position. So when you have that as that pre-conscious understanding, then underneath it, you have the fucking 70 years of being a huge piece of shit and being fed, in America especially, brutally racist propaganda constantly. These are things that he doesn't sit there and go, black people are worse off. He actually thinks that it's awful what we're doing to black people by giving them this chance. How terrible. We have the white man's burden to worry about. There's a different place that he's coming from than just flatly, he thinks this. He's not from the beginning anti-elite. He is flatly hyper-hierarchical, like very much. It's Losing Ground is an incredible hierarchy piece, but he is a member of the elite.
But it's in Losing Ground that he specifically points to the elites.
Yes, but it's not his elites, not the good ones. Again,
okay, good. All right, fair.
This is you talk to racists.
Yeah, but you understand the nuance. To the normal reader, they're not getting that the author is excluding them from the elites that he's referring to.
He's probably putting them into it, actually, because he is a smart science person and a person with knowledge who should be listened to. So he's automatically putting himself in a space of an elite. So when Trump attacks the elites, he is actually attacking, even though Charles Murray I would not call him a scientist, and he's a horrifyingly bad statistician, to say the least. He does
the index that he came up with in the bell curve was MacGyvered out of snot and navel lint. He just made up a goddamn statistical index, demanded that it be valid, and moved forward as if it was for 4 chapters.
We'll just say that Losing Ground is socially Darwinist at best, and does not actually follow any real studies that have sort of gone with it. It's, again, the nature of how, and this is there's a handful of books, The Reactionary Mind, Shipwrecked Mind is a great one about reactionary sort of thinking.
We're going to have to get a book club started, dude.
Do you see behind me? I can go for a while on that one, but gotcha. The sort of underlying thing that's happening with him is he sees himself as a scientist, a truth teller, someone who's meant to be on a pedestal. So when Trump comes out and he says, these people don't know what they're doing, blah, blah, Murray gets pissed because to him, the hierarchy is what's important. He is mostly invested at a desire level in maintenance of the hierarchy and the returning to what he understands to be that setup. And his pre-conscious investment puts him in a place of control and power. Everyone has one of these, and we are all in a million directions. There is not two sides. There isn't the fascist and then the left wing. There isn't the liberals. Everyone is its own unique sort of vector on this. But the reason fascism works so fucking well is because they're able to point in a direction. And it's how you get people in this massive place where Charles Murray hates fucking Trump. Trump fucking doesn't like Charles Murray as an elitist. Yes, but all of Trump's followers and all of Murray's followers tend to be the same fucking person.
Exactly.
And so because to them, they're pointing at a way things ought to be, a goal, a thing, a society, and the best way for it to exist. And so when you sit in that place, and that's what you're going for is, no, what's the best way for society to exist? I don't have a way to measure it except for the ones that have already existed at this point. And that's the problem, because it's the reason ultimately I believe that the Soviet Union ended. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, pointing to societies that have existed in the past doesn't do you any good, because you don't want to, you don't have a time machine and you don't want to go backwards.
No. And even the society we're in right now, I would say, has a significant number of flaws. But what you end up with is this really interesting place of, so what then do we do? And the answer is,
do you work within the system or do you break it down?
Well, you always, to me, life is about harm reduction. And so I did vote for Biden. I did vote in the midterms, and I did vote Dem straight down the line. I'm not going to be like shy about that. And I think if you voted Republican down the line, fuck you. Just as a human being, you're bad at it. Which is fine. You're bad at being a human being. You're not a bad person. You're just bad at being a person. And I think as we sort of move into a space of what comes next, the question ultimately needs to be, what can we do that doesn't have that singular goal? When we look at the history of the Soviet Union, and 𝐒𝐤𝐬𝐿 Žižek has the line where he says one of the great tragedies is what happened in the Soviet Union, and it's not a matter of like the number of deaths, but it's that it just proved there was no alternative to American capitalism in a global way. That challenge happened because when they started, they had this revolutionary energy. They made this huge push, and it was terrifying to, I think, most of the capitalists in the world, what was happening. And it was amazing because we, even in the US, we got unions, we got laws passed around Europe. This happened. There was this big worker awakening that really gave us really the world that we live in, all the good parts, to be perfectly frank. But the Soviet Union, instead of embracing and running with it, they fell back into the society that they knew. Man at the top, strong man coming in and controlling, because underneath it, well, they knew they were these poor workers, the Bolsheviks or whoever, name a class. This is every revolution ever. Their thing that they're into is, I'm in this class. Yeah. But then inside, they're invested in that hierarchy. They love that shit. There's a Reich.
Well, that's the pre-conscious bit right there.
And the unconscious working together. It's where you get fucked, because if they're not both in line to make things revolutionary, you never end there. You end up in a place where if someone is like an actual revolutionary, yay, but if they're invested in structures or the way things were set up or they're emotionally there, that's it. You've lost and you've moved over the other direction. Or even worse, where you have like you're actually revolutionary power internally, but you're married to, and this is Trump supporters, to be frank, you're married to pre-consciously the idea of your white identity inside of a Christian America, and that's where you see yourself as. You will have that revolutionary energy service the worst aspects of things, the fascist side.
Well, because and for me, everything that you're saying breaks down to simplicity. If you're simple, you're going to see things in terms of black and white. Oh, God damn it. I'll wait till he comes back. I have a point to goddamn make, and I want him to hear it.
So we're looking into maybe doing an after show at Sundays. I can't get a hold of Sunday, so I'm going to try to get a hold of them. But an after show there would be great. So thank you for the idea, Maute, and I'm gonna work on that. So I'm very much enjoying this, though.
I'm inviting myself over to Sundays, essentially.
Yeah, Microsoft sucks, dude.
So.
It's not connection. I've got my meters up. I've got 2 gigs up and down right now. It ain't me.
So as I was saying, what you were talking about, simplicity, right? And I'm going to sound very condescending right now. Simple people who break things down in a black and white way, people who break things down that it is a battle of good and evil. And I know what side I'm on, and it's my identity. And unfortunately, your identity is wrapped in really simple things too. It's like there's no reflex of, and also simplicity is, oh, a strong man fixes things. The end, right? What is the most complex way to actually get things done? Cooperate, negotiate, take the time to listen and understand other people's perspectives, move forward with that understanding. Holy fuck, that's going to take forever. Can't I just give me a baseball bat and a strong man? Let's go. Right?
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things because the other layer is people not having full consciousness of it. They're just part of who they are. It's Reich has this line. It's the line that made Deleuze write Anti-Oedipus and Guattari write it, is why do people desire their own oppression? And it's he had that
because
line
we're
after,
blind to what of the the tail wagging the dog, and the tail is societal pressures. It determines
That's
our
actually,
behaviors.
by the way, not terribly far off from where they landed, because he saw, for him, it was World War II. Reich, not exactly a Swedish name, came out of World War II and went, what the fuck, Germany? Like, what? And everyone was saying, oh, they'd been tricked, oh, this or that. And he was like, that's bullshit. Like, it's just straight bullshit. The idea that people are tricked at that level is just not how it works. That they wanted this. So why the fuck did they want this? And I think that is a thing to remember when we look at not just Trump, but Republicans at large, and the people who are voting for Herschel Walker, who in the middle of one of his stump speeches spent 10 minutes talking about vampires and werewolves and how cool vampires are. That really happened.
But werewolves can kill vampires.
Yeah, he didn't know. That's cool. I don't want to be a vampire no more. I want to be a werewolf. That piece of shit weirdo who's like a psychotic, like he's talked about how he plays Russian roulette to get amped up for working out with a real fucking gun and bullet. So people are voting for him. Why? It's not because they're being tricked. That's not how it works. It's because there's a level of attachment to power, attachment to structure that he represents, that they're able to see that that they're able to move their way throrough.
He's an avatar for what they're projecting the ideal to be.
Yeah.
Like he's going to get us there.
It's Deleuze says the line, the flags make the fascist as aroused as anything else. And I agree with this. I do believe it's not like directly sexual. He's making sort of a wry French style joke, but that gets you going. It does. It gets the juices flowing to see that shit and to be part of it and to be part of the crowd. And Herschel Walker gets people jazzed to be going for that in a way that, honestly, Biden does for nobody. There's fucking nobody alive who goes, oh, did you hear that Biden speech? That changed my world. I just can't tell you how excited I was. No, we're here because we're being sober and thinking through things, and we're just not that, and we have a repulsion to the Republican way. That's it. But it's the same thing. It's working in us the same way it is them. I just think it's functioning in a better way. Thank God. We aren't trying to, genocide anyone. But
people are also voting vehemently against the thing that they see as a danger, right? Even though Biden takes on a more level-headed, sober approach, he also doesn't get people riled up. And I mean, I've heard it said, like the midterm elections, very few people voted for Biden, but a whole shit ton of people voted against Trump.
Right. Well, again, but we're talking about that underlying personal investment, but pretty consciously, I am in a position where I should, in theory, be more of a Republican at this point. Like, if you want to talk about where I sit class structure-wise, probably most of us, we're white guys. We're doing okay. We're not awful off. We're doing all right. We don't have the same class or singular interest. We don't see things that way. We see things differently. But our underlying thing is a repulsion. We have the same underlying investment. It's in the opposition to that. That people vote how they vote based on a million different things, but it's the same thing on both sides. It's not like we're not in the same, we're still human. This human thing is over time we have, oh, that won't satisfy me, that will satisfy me. Oh, look, my daddy, who when I was growing up, I blah, 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 I had this relationship with him. Oh, by the way, here's how I have relationships with all these men. Here's how I lived throughout school. Here's how I dealt with work. Here's how I dealt with people. And then lo and behold, I'm 70 years old. And here comes Trump being that very smooth talking guy who remember when he ran my company? That was great. I'm for that. Like, they don't think this, but they're invested. They're there. They're part of that hierarchy. Whereas I think literally the opposite. I have a repulsion to those concepts. I have repulsion emotionally to all of those things. And I'm not alone on that. A lot of people have that. And so when we sit here and we talk about...
What do you mean by those things? Like a smooth talking strong guy?
Yes. I think I'm just...
He's on to you, Nick.
Yeah. But I think a lot of us have a repulsion to what Trump performs as, is performatively. And it's not that we're smarter. It's not that I've read the right things. We have internally a different set of experiences that are reacting differently to things. It's the biggest reason that Republicans have aimed at and been square at education. And I find the most disgusting thing that the Democrats haven't aimed at.
What is going on?
I think we lost him again. It had nothing to do with him seeing through the smooth talking. I swear to God.
Yeah, we got him.
fucking thing.
So you were saying the things the Democrats haven't gone after.
I'm going to try to use the Teams app after this. I just downloaded it during that thing, so we'll see what happens. The Democrats don't go after education. The Republicans do. And in fact, the Democrats helped them. Obama did an exceptionally large amount of work to increase the number of private charter schools for school choice. It was a big push for him. Fuck him. He's a piece of shit. We should have no private schools anywhere in the country. And I'm happy to defend that claim at any point, because ultimately, underneath it all, there's this old Jesuit saying, give me a child for 6 years and you may do what you like with them afterwards. And the Republicans know this. And if they start a child in a place where they can get their investments in a specific way, that's it. You will either end up a crypto-fascist, Christo-fascist weirdo, or you'll break to the left, but end up still believing in those underlying structures. And it's why you run into, and I have many times, work a soup kitchen, if you want, work a homeless shelter, and you'll run into Christians who are very left in how they behave, very left, caring about people, but are incredibly hierarchical and really shitty about sort of everything, because they're still that. Even though they're doing good things, they're still that.
But to me, that's the simple thing. It's I'm not going to say it's a lack of self-reflection, but it's like, if I don't have to do everything and he can do everything else so that I can do what I want, then that's a better life. Like, that's, to me, that's almost instinctive. Oh, you're going to handle that? Cool. Like, it's almost just that.
Yeah.
But with that in mind, it being so simple, I mean, I would doubt.
It's not simple. Christ, that's a million things.
Yeah, humans are messy. So, I mean, I'm trying to ride the balance between humans are messy and sometimes thinking is very black and white and simple, even in messy people. Because the idea that you can have such contrasting notions, that you can be helpful in your capacity, but your capacity is only within this jigsaw puzzle where you're at the bottom of the totem pole all the time, right? Like, somebody hasn't explored that. You know what I mean? And I know it's easier to point out inconsistencies in others, but I mean, to me, that sounds like a destination that you traveled on a road that was paved for you.
It's probably not far from the truth. I've been very fortunate, but I would also say that the other side of that is, as people are sort of created and as we build them, the ability for us to not lay these traps in front of them, the ability for us to create a certain way of how we talk and how we speak. And we'll get into it maybe in another discussion. We will not have time today, but even the very nature of how we talk about things as such puts us in a position that conditions.
Do I get to finish these thoughts? Because I'm just like, wow, I could just come. I'm just gonna vamp and like, it's gonna be completely self-serving tripe, admittedly, but
yeah, this is a new game.
Yeah. So okay, so I think he's gonna try for the Teams client. Hopefully that will be working better for him. So he'll come right back. So if you're just joining us, we still got plenty of time on this one, as long as you guys want to go. I think we have to like a hard limit of 9:15 Eastern Standard. I don't think that's gonna be a problem. And then 9:30 we're gonna be on with Commander McMillan talking a variety of stuff, but mostly I think what's been going on in Ukraine from a military standpoint. There's a lot going on there, and we want to catch up with that. So that's going to be Commander McMillan shortly after this.
All right. And actually, I just got the word that my son needs to be picked up. And with the Oracle passed out on the couch, I mean, he doesn't have to be picked up right now, but I have about 20 more minutes.
All right. So we'll let we've got Brooks back, so 20 more minutes, I think, and then we're good. Oh.
Yeah, sounds fine. Where did I cut? Oh, language, how it works.
Yes.
The way we speak teaches us and tells us how the world works. The problem is that language is necessarily disconnected from actual lived experience. And there's no way around this. It's the nature of language. But we live in a place and we work in a place where language tells us what things mean rather than us telling language what it ought to mean or using that system. I go back to the old sort of joke way back, if you go to the Stoics, if I say a knife is cutting a man, is that true? Well, couldn't I just as easily say a man is dulling a knife? Well, could I say a doctor is cutting a man? Could I say a hospital is performing a surgery? All of those things are describing the same series of events and same series of things, but each one of them has a drastically different meaning. And because of that, I end up getting different images. And with those images, I get different intention. With different intention, I get told different ways the world works.
Oh, yeah.
And as that happens, I necessarily am forced into that state of representation that ultimately forces my desire underneath it to look for things. And it's when you talk about, and going back to the unknown unknowns, when someone says they want an apple, like, do they want an apple? No, they want a specific, but no apple will ever match the apple that they're saying or that they're bringing out in their head. It's not really fucking possible. In fact, people will make a big deal when the apple is a picture perfect of an apple, the rare time that it ever happens. Instead, the reality is you're not aware of the things you don't know. What makes an apple an apple? Well, if you get it, is it slightly oddly shaped? Is it the wrong color? Is it slightly bruised? Is the stem too long? Is it not long enough? What did it like? All of these things that you didn't know you were calling for. And now in that moment, you've done this fucked up thing where you, by asking for the apple and getting one, which in theory should satisfy you, you couldn't be less satisfied.
Yeah.
Just because of the nature of the thing. You've built lack into your world. You've built disappointment. And that continually happens, especially as we grow and as we're children, because the world will never amount to how words work or how our parents tell us or the rules we set forward. And so all this time we constantly are building in lack or disappointment or, oh, it's not worth doing that again, or dissatisfaction. And the places that build satisfaction are where we're constantly rewarded or where we're told we're rewarded, which is even worse. The old example of the dad yelling, look, be a man, men don't cry. And then when you don't cry, he goes, good job, son. There you go. And the next time you get hurt, yeah, see, I knew you're a man now. And how many times does a guy have to say that before the kid really has an image of a man? And then is that a man? I mean, I don't believe so. I don't believe in any of that shit. But these representations form all of us. And as they form us, they then inform our desire, which continues to grow, and what we attach to, and the image is there. It's how we get to a point where someone like my father, who, if you want to talk about all of this, my dad is a right-wing hardcore Trumpster. Like, and he sends me videos like he's ever going to fucking convince me of anything from Lex Friedman.
Don't you love that?
Lex Friedman.
I don't mind Lex.
I do. He anti-vax stuff. The girl from North Korea who she opened one of her talks with, in North Korea, we are not allowed to have a word for love. We do not have it. We don't know love. And I'm like, the word selang, it is fucking Korean. You speak Korean. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? But it's like these bullshit lies. But my dad, who's not a stupid person, buys it because it matches as he knew in his investment. Because I can tell you about my grandpa anytime, and you'd be like, oh, there you go.
Oh, yeah.
That's
I'm right there with you. I mean, but I think that the point that you're making, and I have a buddy, Keith, my best friend, Keith. He's a very smart guy.
Here we go.
He leans. Nick doesn't believe Keith exists because I talk about it.
It's his friend from Canada. I'm just saying, he's got a Canadian. He's got a friend from Canada named Keith. Please continue.
Yeah, anyway. So yeah, Keith is super smart and he leans right. And it's always interesting hearing him come to me with a news thing because it's always the stuff that he finds outrageous. And I've started calling him out on it. I'm like, oh, you sound outraged, because we have discussions about like outrage peddling and shit like that. And like he'll always come to me with like a story, something that he's pissed off about. And then immediately after we talk about it, I just do a quick Google search, and lo and behold, like 2 days earlier, that exact point was floated on Gavin McInnes or some stupid fucking, whatever. And it's just like, I fucking knew it. You know what I mean? But being that he's smart, he owns his own business and he has his own ideas about how things should work. And he doesn't like regulation because it stifles him and his ability to do things. And he's a cabinet maker and he builds houses and he has these opinions, but he's smart. We have really good conversations, even though we disagree. But he's picking up on subtle cues, right? So for instance, earlier today, we got into a pseudo argument about Elon Musk because I kept trying to, because I called him
who is a liar and a scumbag and who doesn't actually invent anything.
Yeah. So, but Keith is totally into cars, and Elon Musk fits a prototype, that unconscious, to Keith, I think, because Keith is also a person, and I'm not talking out of school. Like, I tell Keith to this face, like he's the guy that likes to think that he's cracked the code. So he's also into like some like libertarian thinking and, you know, stuff like that. So we were talking about Elon Musk, and I dropped that like in our conversation. I was like, yeah, like no, nowadays, like the world seems filled with grifters. You know, you have like Steve Bannon's and Trump and Elon Musk, blah, blah, blah. And he fucking pumped the pause button on Elon Musk hardcore. And I think it's because of what you're talking about, because Elon Musk, I think, and his fans like about Elon Musk exactly what his critics don't like. And it's this: he's a man with a vision and a lot of money to make that vision happen. For the people who dig him, that makes him awesome. And everything he's done up until now proves how awesome he is. And for people who don't like it, he is dangerous. And everything he's done up until now proves how dangerous he is. It's the same information.
If you haven't read Ayn Rand, that's it. That's all he is. He is the Ayn Rand archetype in PR. He doesn't exist as that in real life. He's not any of those things. It's a silly, silly, silly thing to call him. But the idea of the hero, the strong man, the person who does the thing, the idea of the important men of history, the ones who shaped it. And to your point, everyone wanting to be one of them specifically, everyone thinks they're Galileo. Everyone. I'm the one who's seen the truth, and most people don't even know the real story of Galileo, for Christ's sakes. The reality is underneath it. And again, underneath it, they are attached to the stories they'd heard as a child. Probably grew up with comic books, cowboys, westerns, whatever it may be. Westerns for my dad, the classics, the Shane and all that, for the strong, good man, the one man who came in and he could save things. Or Ayn Rand, or Howard Rourke, who's the brilliant architect who no one works with, who works with no one, builds the perfect building, but the society ruins it by turning it into tenement housing, so he blows it up. Like this silly, weird hero worship, the idea that people exist alone. They want, because it's hot to them. It is arousing to them internally, emotionally, because it means ultimately that they are, and that they did this, that they are a thing. I used to make a joke, I think I even made it on In Time a few times, that humans exist as a self-justification machine. That's all we are.
Yeah, and that's good.
And it is over and over and over sort of the reality when I run into people that, like, and I'm doing it too. Like, fuck, I've got my shit and you're hearing it, but everyone's got it. But the self-justification people have of, I got to this point and I'm not a sociopath. I just happen to have a lot of money. And yes, I may have crushed a few people on the way, but that's their fault because that's how business is done. Like, whatever they may use to justify their underlying thing. And they look to us, they go, that's my hero. That's the me par excellence, even though it's not, because he's just a piece of shit. Like overall, like in every way, Cody Shoddy, some more news. Does a great one on Elon Musk. That
I just saw it.
It's very difficult not to just understand. And again, people don't. I have a lot of weird nerds who have shown up in my Twitter feed when I make my comments, who get very, very upset with me when I make comments about Musk for the same, but they don't have anything, because ultimately it's an emotional, immediate reaction, which is fair. I have the same thing. And that's the part that, like, I want people to be starting to admit. I naturally have a distaste for Elon Musk. I also have lots of things backing up of why he's not the thing he claims to be. So there you go. That story I get to tell, and anyone else, is only because, and I'm going to take it all the way back to my point I just made, because of how we tell stories in representation, those stories become parallel rather than intersecting. The doctor cutting a patient or the patient doling a doctor's knife is the same story. But we don't see that because we don't start with the story. I mean, we start with the story. We don't start with what's happening, the things at the bottom, the actual lived experience. And so as we do this and we have these political times, it's the reason that we're as divorced from ever from reality, because we have no ability to reconnect. You watch Trump, and you feel free, watch Trump's inauguration speech. I know you watched it, Nick, at least. It could not be more disconnected.
Oh, it's the worst.
He said we hadn't had wars for decades.
Oh, he said shit that was patently absurd, and people who were alive at this time should have been aware. And I know everybody bought it. It was not easy, actually, how disconnected from reality it was.
They're just not there.
Well, let me ask you this: how much do you think the internet has to do with the amount of disconnection we have right now? I call it the splinter net.
I mean, I have mixed feelings on a lot of things. The internet's a big one, I think.
But specifically as it contributes to the disconnection in society, political realms.
Well, let's talk about 3 different types of people. And it's going to go by age. And it's going to be my dad's generation. Then let's talk about us, which I think I'll put us, if you guys are under 54, 55. Yeah, right around there to like 40, which is a cusp for me. And then the kids, we'll call them, right? The kids.
I love this distinction. I love these buckets.
So for old people, it's the worst thing that has ever happened to them, period. Because they have no ability whatsoever to parse information, and they were never taught how to do it properly. I do not know anyone, and there are people that exist that kind of handle it okay. The only old people I know that are even slightly sane just kind of don't really use the internet at all. Like that's the closest it comes. If they're old, they use the internet, they're fucked. Like that's it. You're disconnected. You don't know how to parse information. It's coming faster. It's the Vonnegut line. For all of history, man was frustrated because his brain worked faster than the world. Now man is frustrated because the world works faster than his brain. And I think that is the best way to describe it. Our generation, I think, is more of a mixed bag. I think it's dangerous in a lot of ways. I think Instagram and social media are dangerous flatly. But, and then I'm going to talk about kids, because the middle guys, us middles in between, we're a mixed bag, because it's both of these. The kids, 28-point break for Democrats in the midterm for people under the age of 30. That is fucking unheard of in a midterm election in my lifetime and before. That's just not possible. Number 1 reason, it's abortion. Number 2 reason, future of the country. What the fuck? What the fuck? Are you kidding me? Like, so there's something going on in how someone came to the internet. Kids who grew up in it, and I used to make this, stole from someone, I think it was Jack, founder of Twitter, put it best. It might have been someone else. There are people who existed too long before the internet, and they see the internet as this sort of smoky cloud out there. Then there's people who lived before, but kind of grew up in it. My age, I remember answering machines, and I also remember like having to yell, "Mom, are you home?" when I got home from work, from school, that kind of thing. But also I had an AOL account when I was like 8. So it's a weird mishmash. We're more aware that we're in it. Like we're aware we're inside of the fog. Kids, it's clear air, because it's just as far as they know the world they breathe.
It's the water they're swimming in.
And they've had to grow up with this fire hose of info and processing it. Breaking that hard for Democrats in this election is weird, but doing so in a way where socialism is discussed again. That's not a thing my dad's generation. Good fucking luck with that thing. You can't even talk about, by the way, what is socialism? I'm not even going to justify it. That's the response. Like, their brain's not there. My generation, more difficult. The kids, they're, well, actually, which flavor of communism in it? Because I'm more of a social anarchist, but also I'm up for anarcho-communism.
I'm an anarcho-capitalist with a little social flavoring and a sprinkle of communism.
It's not even like terminally online people. Everyone is kind of more aware. And that level of thing, maybe it's just because of, again, where you were born, how you were invested, how your stimulus response worked, because the internet is very good at stimulus response. And I would have a feeling if you're like a 20-year-old right now, you've been so fucked up from being a junkie on the heroin that is Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, that I'm not saying you're immune to it, but it's basically you get to live the life of an ex-drug addict, and you get to see it a little bit differently. I have conversation with kids. I run the Duluth and Guatemala Quarantine Collective, 3,500 strong people focused on Duluth and studies around Duluth and Bergson and Simondon and Bataille, and we get a fuck ton of kids from fucking 14 years old all the way through we've got 70-year-olds on the server. And I can tell you the brunt of the base, sort of that lower age group, their interest and understanding of it is better than I could have hoped. And it's not necessarily good, but they're aware of more things around things. And that alone sort of as a thing is interesting. So Do I think the internet's the biggest mistake? I do. I think the internet's directly responsible for Donald Trump because old people suck. Like, old people suck. The good news is time kills everyone, and we all have to die. And so eventually old people die and better things happen.
Clip that.
Somebody's going to clip that. I think Titan's already on it. The good news is time kills everyone.
It is. It got me my other account banned from Twitter because I said it to somebody. I said, the only good news is that time eventually will kill everyone who's old. Like, that's the only saving grace of death.
There's a researcher named Anil Seth who studies consciousness, and he goes, when consciousness ends, there's nothing to worry about. Nothing at all. That's
a Raymond Smullyan line. I'm not worried about death. It won't happen in my lifetime.
All right, let's end it on that high note. I got to go pick up my son.
No, go. This was great. Thank you so much.
I am fascinated with the way that you think and the references that you use. I want to be more well-versed on some of the things that you mentioned, but I think that it would be, let's take care of it in the Discord DMs. I would like from you a basic reading list to wrap my head around some of the ideas that you're...
Start with The Accursed Share by George Bataille.
Okay, I'll start there.
It's book volume 1. It's a 3-volume series. Volume 1 is the one that I think is most interesting. It's about how debt actually works in society. By the way, just so you know, it's not. It works pretty heavily. That would probably be there's a couple starters. I'll send over a few.
But you also mentioned a psychodynamic approach to what were you talking about? We'll talk about it in the Discord.
Deleuze and Guattari, Anti-Oedipus, as well as 1,000 Plateaus. It is called the Capitalism Schizophrenia.
I want more information on that.
I do a reading of Anti-Oedipus every Tuesday at noon on our Discord server, and then I join President Sunday on Saturdays to do the same reading and repeat it for the YouTube audience.
Oh, badass. All right. Well, then I might just ask for an invite to your Discord server if you give them out.
I do. It is discord.gg/DGQC.
Well, we can get you one, Matty.
Oh yeah, no, it's easy.
I'd like to have more conversations with you if you're open to it.
No, I'd love to pick a specific thing or even one of these texts and really dive into it. Bataille, Clastres, Society Against the State is another one. Those two are, like, to me, I think the more early formative, like how society works and breaking down where we have some serious misconceptions. Bataille does a very good job of it. He has an entire book dedicated to basically, it's called Erotism. It's about erotic death and how death and sexuality are intertwined. It's hardcore. So,
all right.
Yeah, he wrote a long erotic story called The Eye. I don't recommend it for anyone, but I always mention it because eventually someone will write me and go, "Why the fuck did you say that?"
Good man.
So,
planting seeds or dropping bombs.
It's a nuke. That's a nuke.
All right, Nick, thanks so much for the opportunity and the platform. I'm the one who reached out to Nick. I was just like, I need to have a talk with this guy.
Well,
I was like, Nick, set something up next week.
I'll do this again easily. And I have you can see I've got a few books behind me, and over DMs I'll send you a few, and you can just pick one, read a handful of pages, and we'll just discuss. I'm very happy to do that.
Oh, that's
especially
great.
With someone who's got a background in psychology or more traditional sort of the science side of it versus the philosophy side. Because in my experience, Deleuze's sort of take on everything is actually where a lot of people are landing now in the neurobiology space, which I think is pretty fascinating.
Oh, man. Let's do that. Let us begin this journey. Thank you, everybody in the side chat, for commenting, for being here through the technical difficulties. You guys rock.
I need to figure out what's wrong with my internet. Jesus Christ.
Well, we'll figure it out. We'll get this thing. You haven't frozen in a while, so it must be the Teams app must be working better.
I switched to a different browser. So.
Oh, is that it?
Yeah.
Well, that might be all it is. All right. Thanks, Nick.
Well, my pleasure. Thank you both. I've streamed with both of you. I always learn something with each of you, and so I knew this was going to be good. So I appreciate you wanting to come on. Hope you guys will come back and do this again. Would love to do this again. So the time slot is yours if you guys want it. In about a little less than an hour, we're going to have on Commander Macmillan to talk about what's been going on in Poland and in Ukraine. So I hope you guys will join us for that. Operator Starsky will be on Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern. He's a Ukrainian National Guardsman. We're very lucky to have him on, assuming he's got power, which he does not always have. We can't always reach him, but we're hoping. Sincerest apologies for the technical issues. I think we're okay now. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you both for coming, and we look forward to seeing you guys in just about an hour. Have a good one, everyone.
Peace.